You know, I love podcasts. They are fantastic. And when you're walking the dogs or you're doing that, it's literally my favourite medium. What I love more than anything. And there's been a lot of discussion about podcasts in the media this week. And I thought I'd talk to you about it. So on Sunday, there was a full article on the front page of the New York Times on podcasting, which is pretty cool. Good news, because, as I mentioned, podcasting to me is my absolute favourite medium. Like, if you were to ask me if there was only one way you were allowed to receive information, it would be through podcasts, I think. I just love them to death. That's the good news. Bad news was the article was basically a bunch of leaked information from podcasters who had met with Apple, basically asking Apple to fix all of their woes. Now, this was a real an eyebrow raiser for me, because Apple, as you'll see, has never really, they do a very simple thing for podcasting. They provide a directory. They're very hands-off. And I would argue, as others argued, it's dangerous for you to ask Apple to be more hands-on and more involved, particularly for independents like us. My focus for you guys are people who are passionate about a niche, who want to make a living in that niche. So I've got a very specific audience. The people who spoke to Apple are NPR, ex-NPR podcasts I love and adore, I might add, but they are extremely last century in their organisation. Huge overheads, very expensive way of approaching and building their whole podcast. So they're after a whole bunch of things because they come from the world of advertising. Whereas you and I know, if we build our audience off the back of our podcast, we can make way more by serving our markets. I do feel sorry for podcasts that are more general in nature or topic in nature, but to me, they have crowdfunding as a great way of being and getting funded. I pay for a number of podcasts, which I love. I'm more than happy to be a Patreon and pay a couple of dollars a month or a yearly membership, because I value what they do, and I love on every day when I go for a walk listening to those podcasts. Now, as Marco Arment tweeted, geez, I can't put my words together today. He tweeted, if you can't make a decent living from having a six-figure audience, that's not Apple's fault. That's on you. Now, it's interesting. The New York Times article actually started off with a couple of quotes from Steve Jobs' introduction to podcasting way back in 2005. And it, makes the mention of the funny clip of Wayne's World. It's sort of a bit like Wayne's World meets radio. Now, they didn't actually say what he said next. So let's have a look at this video and I'll comment on it just after we watch it.
Now, we recently announced something new for iTunes and iPod, and it's called podcasting. And what is podcasting? It's been described a lot of different ways. Another way it's been described is Wayne's World for radio, which means that anyone without much capital investment can make a podcast, put it on a server, and get a worldwide audience for their radio show. And that's true too. Now, it's not just amateurs doing these things, though. These 8,000 are not all amateurs, but the pros have realized that this is huge. And here's just a list of some of the companies doing podcasts now.
I don't think Steve was being too complimentary about amateurs as compared to professionals. Yet, I've got to say, all the podcasts I know and love, they're at Radiolab and, This American Life and, incredible storytelling and, deserve all the praise they get. But when I think about the podcasts I love, for goodness sake, the Pen Addict podcast, which I adore, I flew to Atlanta to listen to, I actually created an event to be able to, so I could actually go to the Atlanta Pen Show, because I'm a psycho that way, so I could watch the recording of their 200th episode and indeed celebrate the fact that both Mike with his podcasting network and Brad in particular is able to now make a full-time living. Now, this is an interesting counterpoint. You've heard me often talk about 1,000 true fans, and that's what I want a niche style business to have. A true fan, my definition, is somebody who is prepared to spend one day's wages, which is actually the original Kevin Kelly definition. I shouldn't say it's my definition, but I love it, and I think it. So I think, is there 1,000 people on the planet that would be prepared to pay me $100 a year? So, spend $100 with me over the course of the year. You find 1,000 people that do that, that's a $100,000 a year business. You can make a living. You can't run a New York-based, expensive, massive overhead podcasting company on that. But for people that I work with and the people that I deal with, people who have obligations and jobs and all these sorts of things, to be able to earn $100,000 and to be able to get out of the situation they're in, or at least have the choice, that's exciting. And to live in a lifestyle that gives them flexibility, that's the beauty of podcasting.
Oh, he's a good buddy.
Let's make this intensely practical. If you're in a niche, why should you be doing a podcast? What should be the objective of your podcast, and why should you be doing? So let's have a look at that.
Do you like my cool beats?
Job one is build a list. Build a list. Build a list. Just in case you missed that, build a list. You have to collect email, and if there's one thing that the NPRs and the pro podcasts of the world completely miss, and a lot of my favourite podcasts, they don't get a reliable way of being able to communicate with their audience. Yes, obviously to sell them stuff, but to just let them know what's happening and what's going on. If their audiences would love to buy t-shirts, their audiences would love to crowdfund, if they were reminded via email, because at the end of the day, as much as I think push notifications and messages is the mode of communication of the future for marketing, right now, email is everything. And if you don't have a way to collect email and a funnel built for your podcast, you're insane. Okay? You're just insane. Now, having said that, even if you don't have anything, any way of collecting emails, and I'll come back to that in a second, why do you have a podcast? The people who listen to your podcast are the most likely people to be one of your 1,000 true fans, without a shadow of a doubt. They are the most engaged because psychologically, think about it, it's the most intimate relationship. You are speaking to them through their ears. Now, people think like video is the most intimate thing. No, it's not. We've been trained through years of watching television that we know there's a disconnect, right? We know there's a disconnect between the person we're watching on the screen compared to the person that is sitting watching. There's that obvious disconnect. But when we're hearing something through the ear, particularly for those of us who are not a millennial, who actually know how to use a phone, that was the way we learnt to communicate and have our most intimate conversations with people. And that's what podcasting delivers, and that's what's so exciting about it. So if you focus on your market's pains, gains, and the jobs to be done, the things they need to learn, like Pen Addict does for fountain collecting, like the Angry Chicken podcast does for Hearthstone, like the Arsecast does for people who follow Arsenal, poor people at the moment, they are fantastic. They also fulfill another role, which is, I love Hearthstone, I love fountain pens, and I love Arsenal Football Club. But I'm busy. I have to earn a living, and need to earn a living, and need to speak to you guys and help my tribe out. So being able to listen to those podcasts each week and stay up to date and be able to have a conversation with anybody about the latest hot topics because I've listened to these podcasts and stay informed, that is an incredible service. And I'm always so thrilled to either become a patron or do that, because for a couple of bucks, it's fantastic, right? That, to me, is the reason you have a podcast, and that's its huge advantage. But being marketers, we can take these advantages. Things that are really important are things like show notes, because there is one huge weakness in podcasting, is typically when we're doing podcasts, we're doing it while doing something else. We're walking the dog, we're at the gym, we're driving in the car, we're doing other work, although I can't listen to a podcast and actually work, but some people do. We're doing something else. So often when we hear something that's really cool and we want to actually interact, we can't right now. So you've got to keep that in mind. Again, another reason why it's so important to get people's emails so you can let them know what's going on, so you can send them out show notes, so you can engage them with the content. Because just like every other media, we've got stacks of things that we want to do. I've got a podcast queue, and I don't listen to all those podcasts in that podcast queue, even though I want to. I've subscribed to them. I just don't have enough time. So that, to me, is something that you need to keep in mind.